What's hopping, everyone? Fortune Croaky here. Welcome to a Limbus Company gameplay tutorial. I've been talking a lot about making one of these. I've mentioned it on stream, and I have a couple friends who are also asking me, Croaky, where's the tutorial? So here we are. This is going to cover the basic gameplay mechanics of Limbus Company, which includes skills, clashes, sanity, ego, sin affinities. We're going to cover all of that. So to start us off, we're going to have to first understand what an identity is and what an ego is. So, in Limbus Company, you have identities and egos for each of the 12 basic characters. These characters are known as sinners. They are the 12 characters who are going to be making up your party 100% of the time. And so, in playing this game, you will get very familiar with them. But each character has their default identity, which is the ones you start with, and then they have identities that you can get from the gacha, such as what this one is, Warp Faust. And so if you look at her default identity, you can see it has these skills. You'll get passives later on that you unlock. It has a defense skill, and it has its own level, it has its own stats. And so what an identity is it's the same character, but it's a different version of them. In-game, it's like them from a different timeline. And so they'll have different stats, they'll have different skills, and different defense skills, different passives, and basically just different team synergies. And so the only thing that really stays consistent here is the character and their ego. And so ego is character specific. Basically what they are is their super moves. So if we look at representation emitter, every ego is specific to a certain character, so you can't equip them to other characters. You'll get an ego for that character, and then they'll be able to use it. So for representation emitter, we can see it has a cost, we can see it is a skill, and it has its own passive. So we'll get into all of that later on. But basically what we need to know for now is that you can get new identities from the gacha, they'll have different skills, and then you can get ego from the battle pass as well as from the gacha, and then also every character starts with a default identity and default ego. So representation emitter is Faust's default ego. Hexnail I got from the gacha. You can equip up to 5 ego, and it's one of each classification. So the classifications may seem somewhat arbitrary, but in Lobotomy Corporation they were danger levels, which implies that higher classification ego might be stronger. And so right now we only have the lower levels, so we have Zayn, we have Teth, and we have Hei, and that's all that's in the game so far. But later on we'll probably see Wa and Aleph, and so you can only equip one of each of those for each character. So then if we, for example, look at Dawn, she has La Sangre de Sancho and Fluid Sac, and so this one is in the Zayn slot, and this one is in the Hei slot, and she doesn't have a Teth ego, at least mine doesn't. And then you can see we have several identities for Dawn. Okay, so first I'll explain to you the team composition screen. So this you'll see when you enter a level, so we're doing 1-2 to avoid spoilers. If we enter it, you can see we have all of our characters visible here. You click a character to select them, and they will be added to your team. Here, let me move my camera out of the way so that you can see. Okay, so you can see for this specific level we can bring 4 characters. Right now we've selected 1, that's Dawn. If I select 4 characters, we have a full team. If you wanted to change your identity for your characters, you will click this button, and now when you click on them, it'll show you their available identities. So you'll click on the one you want. You can also change ego here. So if I wanted to unequip Fluid Sac, you just click it. It'll be removed from this list on the right. Click it again to re-add it. You can also go to the support tab. This will let you borrow characters from any of your friends that you may have added. And so now we have our Warp Faust with her 2 ego that we want to use. We just click back. We stop editing our team, and now when we click her, we can add her to our team. So, on the right side here, you can see this bar that says affinities. Right now we only have Warp Dawn equipped, and so we will see the affinities of her skills. So if we look at her page, we can see her first skill, Rip. This number is how many copies of it are in her deck. So she has 3 copies of Rip, she has 2 copies of Leap, and she has 1 copy of Rip Space. And so we can see on the right, she has 3 Sloth skills, that's the yellow one. She has 2 Gloom skills, that's the light blue one. And she has 1 Envy skill, that's the purple one. So these will correspond to the colors of these skills. So we can see yellow, light blue, and purple. And then the number on the right, so the 0 out of 3, 2 out of 4, 0 out of 4, those are the costs of the egos. So, if I wanted to make a team that could use specific egos, and this will all make sense later on, but, so for example, if I pick Chi Dawn, so now we can see she has, her ego need 4 Gloom, 4 Pride, and 3 Lust. However, she has 3 Wrath, 1 Lust, 2 Envy on She. And so you can see 3 Wrath, 3 of the red one, 2 of the purple one, and 1 of the orange one. Okay, and when we add more members of our team, we'll add the affinities that they have, but we'll also add the costs of their ego. So if I grab these 4, now we can see there are no 0 out of anything. We have at least 2 for every sin affinity that we are using for ego. And so this is what you want to aim for in team building, is you don't want to have any 0s out of like a number. It's fine if we have 0 Sloth here because none of my ego are using Sloth. But for everything else, since we're using it, we want to have at least a couple of them. Okay. And so this would be considered a good team comp, because you can use all of the ego that are equipped by these characters. Okay, so now I'm going to explain to you how skills actually work. So we talked about how in a character's deck, they'll have 3 copies of one skill, 2 of another, and 1 of the last one. But we don't really know what that means. So these 6 skills, these 6 tokens, will compose of a character's deck. And so at the bottom here, you'll see the list of skills available this turn. And so each character has a column, and there will be 2 skills in that column. So for example, for Ishmael, we can choose between Quake Rounds or Shove. Those are our 2 available skills. And so these are just 2 of the 6 skills that she has that are drawn randomly. So we had 3 copies of Shove, we drew 1 of those copies. We had 2 copies of Quake, we drew 1 of those copies. And so that's what you see down here. What you see slightly grayed out back here, that's the next skill that's coming down. So that's the next one, like kind of in the draw pile, if you imagine it as a card game. So the next skill that would be on top of the deck is this one. And so when you use one of these 2, it'll be replaced by this skill. Then you'll see a new one at the top of the deck, and the cycle will just continue each turn. And so once you have used all 6 copies of these skills, then they'll get shuffled and you'll get dealt new ones again. Then it'll cycle again. So every character has their own unique skills, but generally it looks like, at least at this point in the game, every character will have 3 of their first skill, 2 of their second skill, and 1 of their third skill. And your third skill you will not be unlocking until later on. So when you first start the game, it'll only be skills 1 and 2. So you don't have to worry about the third skill yet. Okay. So for the skills themselves, here, I'll explain to you using Ishmael, but you can see a lot of numbers here. So we've already discussed that this number is the number of copies of it in your deck. This here, this icon above the name, is the number of coins it has. And so this will come into play later on, but basically this is the number of times you attack using that skill. So for Shove, she'll attack once. This is the default value, so this is how much damage you'll be doing, is 4. And then when you attack, you flip the coin, and if the coin lands on heads, you get this heads bonus, so +6. If the coin lands on tails, you get no bonus, and it'll just be the default value. So if Shove, you use it, you flip a heads, it becomes 4 + 6, the value is 10. If you get tails, you don't get the +6, the value stays as 4. This number is the offense level. If it's a lot higher than the enemy's offense level, which you can check, so this enemy has 10 as their offense level, we have 17. So if your number is higher, you will get an additional bonus to this number I don't know the exact calculation, but the higher your number is than theirs, the bigger the bonus that you get. So if we look at Quake rounds in comparison, there are 2 copies of this in your deck. This one also has an offense level of 17, and this one has 3 coins, which means that you are going to be flipping these 3 coins, and we'll cover that when we get into, like, when we actually select our skills and take our turn. But for now, all you need to know is this is the default value, 4, and then a heads will give you +3. Additionally, these are the effects of the coins, so if I move myself out of the way. Okay. So, this is the effect of the first coin. On hit, it inflicts 1 attack power down. If you scroll over it or tap it on the mobile version, you can read what the effect does. The second coin has this effect, and then the third coin has this effect. And so that's what these Roman numerals mean, is they correspond to like first coin, second coin, third coin, which is essentially first attack, second attack, or like first hit of the attack, second hit of the attack, third hit of the attack. Okay. So now when we are using our skill, if the enemy is also using a skill, it will become a clash. And so in a clash, basically the values that your skills roll are compared to the values the enemy's skills roll, and the winner gets to use their skill, and the loser does not. So there are a lot of numbers up top here. This can get a little confusing. If we look at Quake rounds first, on the left, you can see the icon for the skill. It's like the picture of Ishmael holding a pistol. And so above that to the left, you see the number 4. That's the base value. The 3+ is the bonus that you get for each heads. Below that, you can see your offense level and defense level. So we have 17 and 22 respectively. Then the number on the right side is the calculated damage range. So it's estimating that we will do between 5 and 14 damage. Now if we look at the enemy's skill, we can see their information. It's all the same. It's just reversed in terms of the UI. So we can see the icon, and now we can see on the top right of that, their default value is a 2. If they roll a heads, they get +2. Their damage range is 2 to 6, and now you see they have the +50% above their skill. That's the damage bonus that they're getting. So they're doing 50% extra damage if they hit us with it. That's not going to affect the clash. It only matters if they win the clash and then they deal damage. Additionally, every skill has a damage type and a sin affinity. So the damage types you can see on the left side here, resistances, there's slash, there's pierce, and there's blunt. And so different characters will have different resistances to these damage types. So if we check here, we can see down here, this is the blunt icon. This skill does blunt damage. And actually all of LCCB Ishmael's skills do blunt damage. Now there's also sin affinities. Each skill has a sin affinity, and that's the color that it is. So green is gluttony, for example. Light blue is gloom. Dark blue is pride. You don't need to memorize the names, but it helps to know the colors. And so these essentially serve as elements in any other game. You can imagine that gluttony is like plant, that gloom is water, that pride is steel, etc. So like wrath could be fire, and on and on. Like they're basically elements with sins as their flavor text. And so enemies will also have different resistances to different elements. Okay. So when you want to select your skills, you just draw a line through the ones that you want to use. Additionally, at the very top in the center, it'll tell you your likelihood of winning. So we are dominating with these. Here we're only favored. You can see the enemy's numbers and our numbers. So we are rolling a 4 plus 6 on heads. The enemy is rolling a 3 plus 8 on heads. So if you want to do a bit of math, if we get a tails and they get a tails, we win because we have a 4 and they have a 3. If we roll a heads and they roll a tails, we win because we have a 10 and they have a 3. If they roll a heads, though, we have no way of winning. So that's why it's favored and not dominating, whereas our odds of winning here and here are much higher. So, another thing that beginners are going to want to do is go to settings, gameplay, turn off auto coin toss. This will make it a lot easier to follow what's going on, and it'll make it a lot easier for me to explain what's going on as well. Okay. And so you can click start once you've selected your skills, or once you've drawn it, you can just hold it over start and let go, and your turn will start. Okay. So now we're clashing. So we can see all of our characters and all of the enemies have their coins here ready to flip. So you can see the base value at this point in the combat. For example, okay, let's look at Dawn because she's the closest to us. She has a default value of 4. The enemy has a default value of 3. And so you can see when you are clashing, you flip every coin that you have. So for Dual Strike, for example, this has 2 coins. Each coin is a +6. So for each of these 2 coins that lands on heads, you will get a +6. So if we get 2 tails, it's a 4. If we get 1 heads, that's a 10. And if we get 2 heads, this number becomes a 16. Similarly for the enemy, each of their coins is a +2 if they get a heads. So if they get 1 heads, it's a 5. If they get 2 heads, that's a 7. So for characters with 1 coin, obviously they'll only flip that 1 coin. So this slice, it'll be either 3 or 3 + 8. So 3 or 11. And then we can see for Ishmael, since she has 3 coins, we can't see the number because it's covered, but I believe it's a 4. And so if she gets a heads on each of these coins, you could get a maximum of +9, so +3 for each of these coins, and that would give her a 13. Okay. So if we keep an eye on Dawn, we can see whether she rolls a heads, how many heads or tails she rolls. Okay. So you saw 1 coin lit up. That means she rolled 1 heads, so she got +6. I believe she also got a bonus for her offense level. Now, because we won that clash, the enemy lost 1 coin. And so now they still have 1 coin left, and we have to repeat the clash with our 2 coins and their 1 coin. And basically the clashes will repeat until the enemy has no coins left. So now we have a 4, 2 coins with +6s. They have a 3 with only 1 coin with a +2. Okay. And so we got +2 there because of our offense level, but we didn't get any heads. Okay. And now that we've won the clash, we get to do direct damage using however many coins we have. But if you'll notice, we're no longer flipping all of the coins at once. Now we're just flipping the first coin. So the way that damage dealing works, when you are directly attacking the enemy and they are not attacking you back, you flip the first coin. So this is a 4. If it lands on heads, you get +6. That's a 10. You do 10 damage. Then when you get to the second coin, you keep the 10 and you flip the second coin. So that means that the second attack could do 16 damage because the 10 carries over. So let's see if either of these guys rolls a heads. So we'll keep in mind Ishmael has a 4, Dawn has a 4. Okay, Dawn rolled a heads. So now we see she keeps the 10. And now she flips the second coin. And so if she gets another heads, she'll do 16. But if she gets a tails, she'll still do 10. So it's cumulative for when you're dealing damage. Similarly for Ishmael, she got tails. So she only got to do 4 damage. Now she flips the second coin. And if she gets a +3, then she gets to do 7 damage with this attack. But if she gets tails, she still only does 4 damage with the second attack, with the second hit of her. You can also see the results of the earlier coin flips. So this one is darkened because it got a tails. This one's lit up because it got a head. And now they both got tails. Okay. And then, so she got heads with the last one. Alright. So now I will explain to you how stagger works. So you can see that this character is staggered. When a character is staggered, they can't use any skills. So you can tell because he has broken coin slots, he has no skills being activated. Additionally, when a character is staggered, they take double damage from all damage types. So this character is fatal to only slash damage. He will take double damage from slash damage, The other 2 damage types deal 1 times damage to him. However, because he's staggered, regardless of whether the damage is slash, blunt, or pierce, we will still do double damage to him. Now, the way that you stagger a character is you have to knock their HP past this little glowing line. So if we look at this other enemy, we can see this lit up line on his health bar by his feet. If his health bar passes that line, he will become staggered. And so then he won't be able to act next turn, and he'll take double damage from all damage types. We can see that our characters also have stagger. So when you have a larger HP bar, you will have more stagger thresholds. If your health passes one of these, you become staggered. Then you recover from stagger after being immobilized for 1 turn. If you get staggered again, it just repeats. If you pass multiple stagger thresholds in a single turn, then the stagger will be amplified and they'll take more than double damage. So they'll take an even larger amount of damage. Okay, so it's also possible to stagger enemies between hits of an attack. So as you just saw, we staggered with the 3rd hit of suppress. So the enemy is now staggered. The 4th hit will get a damage bonus because it's hitting a staggered enemy. Like that. Okay, so let's talk about sanity and ego. First of all, sanity. You can see this little number on the bottom here, next to the HP bar of each of my characters. Right now it's very blue, it says 45. So that's your sanity. Sanity ranges from -45 to 45. And when it's in the negatives, the lower it is, the lower your chance of flipping a heads. So in other words, the higher your chance to flip a tails. The higher it is, when it's in the positives, the higher your chance of flipping a heads. So if you're at 45 sanity, your chance of flipping a heads is at its maximum possible chance. It's well above 50%. Similarly, this enemy, you can see, while we can't check the specific values of enemies' sanity, it's looking a little red, so his odds of rolling a heads are lower. You gain sanity by winning clashes and defeating enemies. And similarly, you lose sanity by losing clashes and from your allies dying. But on top of that, you can also lose sanity from ego. So if we check Faust's ego, you can check ego by clicking on a character, and then instead of looking at their identity, you click this tab right here where it says ego. It's kind of a small button, it's easy to miss. And then it'll show you which ego you have equipped in each slot for that character. So let's check on Hex now. This is an ego that you can get from the gacha. It'll tell you its sanity cost. So Hexnail costs 20 sanity. If I use it, my sanity will drop by 20. It tells you your current sanity as well, so right now I'm at 45. If I use Hexnail, I'll go down to 25. Not including like whatever sanity I would gain from winning clashes using Hexnail. If you use an ego in negative sanity, it will become its corroded counterpart. And so this, when you are corroded, you have a chance of hitting your allies with it instead, but it becomes a different form of the ego. So for example, this, it changes from on heads you inflict curse to on hit you inflict curse, as well as the numbers changing a little bit. Okay, otherwise, an ego is basically a super move. It functions like any other skill. Like we've already gone over how skills work. This is the base value. This is the bonus you get when you flip heads. This is the attack power. And then these are the effects of the first coin, or however many coins. This cost here is something you need to watch out for. So it'll tell you the cost. This corresponds to the sin affinities. Every time you use a skill, on the right, you can see you gain 1 ego material of the corresponding color. So like if I use a green skill, I'll gain 1 gluttony material. If I were to use energy cycle, which is a purple skill, I'll gain a purple envy ego material, etc. And so every ego will have a unique cost. So for example, snag harpoon costs 2 wrath, 2 gloom. So we currently have 2 wrath, 3 gloom, which means that we have the cost of snag harpoon. Also, Snag Harpoon costs 0 sanity. The default ego all costs 0 sanity. So the ones you start the game with are free. And then you can see its effects. It has 19 base value, plus 4 on heads. The other thing that ego have, once you have upgraded them, is they'll have a passive. And so the way that an ego passive works is it will trigger every turn of the fight after you have used your ego. So you use your ego once, and you gain that passive permanently for the rest of that fight. So if I click and hold on Ishmael's portrait, it opens up a list of all of her ego. You can see this is lit up, so I can click on it, and it will replace one of my skills with her ego. Okay. So, I'm going to use this. Okay, so you can see ego clashes just like any other skill. They have unique cutscenes, however. And now that I've used it, the passive compulsion is now active on Ishmael. So that will be active for the rest of the fight. So now let's also talk about Sin Resonance, since we have the opportunity. If you chain 3 skills of the same color in a turn, you can see this thing pops up on the top left corner. It says Envy Res. So we have activated Envy Resonance. What this does is it will boost the damage of every skill of that color that you're using. So you have to use 3 or more of a specific color, and it will boost the damage of every skill of that color in one turn. Additionally, so you saw when I hit the third one, you can see a little thing pops up that says self-charging. That is an identity passive. So different from an ego passive, which triggers after you use the ego, an identity passive triggers on a turn-by-turn basis if you meet the prerequisite. So the prerequisite for Faust's passive self-charging is you have to use 3 envy skills in a turn, and then it will activate just for that turn, and she'll gain +1 charge count after an attack. And so since we are using 3 envy skills this turn, you can see on the left side her self-charging skill has activated. Meanwhile, like Prepared Mind, it's not active this turn because we're only using 1 Wrath skill. Okay. So that is how ego and identity passives work. So lastly, let's talk about defensive skills. So when we click on a character, we can see there's also a tab for their defense skill. You can click on this tab and it'll tell you the values of the defense skill. You can see how many coins it has, the default value, and the value on heads. This will apply for every character. Every identity has a unique defense skill. So if you change a character's identity, their defense skill will change. The way that you use a defense skill is you just click once on their portrait, and it'll appear on the board. It's kind of like ego, but instead of holding, you just tap it. Okay, and we can see we have one of each of the defense skills, plus an extra guard. So there are 3 types of defense skills, and I'll just show you how they work in combat. Okay. So, guard. What this does is you flip the coin. It functions like a skill. If you land heads, the value becomes the value with the bonus. If you land tails, it's without. And whatever that value is gets added onto your HP bar as temporary HP for that turn. So it's basically a buffer so that you can take some damage without it actually cutting into your HP. The way evade works is if your evade number is higher than the enemy's attack number, then you dodge their attack, and you can reuse this. So it works like any other skill would work in a clash. And then counterattacks you first have to take the hit. So they will attack you, it will hit your HP. Then your counterattack triggers and you'll hit them back. So it's like revenge. So let's keep an eye on Dawn and see if she dodges. Yeah, so she rolled a 12, so she did not take damage from that. We can also see Faust rolled an 8. She got 8 temporary HP. It's blue. And we can see Ishmael also got 10 temporary HP, also in blue. And then we can see Heathcliff up here is now using his counter. He took the hit. Now he's attacking back. Okay, so Dawn dodged successfully. And there you go. So that is defense skills. Generally, I don't use them very often, but there are situations where it might be useful, especially if your odds of winning are hopeless. Like if that display at the top, instead of favored, says hopeless, then you might want to consider using defense skills instead. Okay, so next we'll talk about abnormality fights. So everything that we've said up until now applies to human fights. When you're fighting against monsters known as abnormalities, the mechanics change slightly. So, up until now, I forgot to mention, but every character has a speed value. So you can see this on their character information panel. Under status, it'll have a range of numbers. So for Dawn, it is 3 to 6 on the left side here. That is the range of values that she can roll for her speed. Every character has a unique range, so like LCCB Ishmael is 2 to 6, etc. And so your characters will be organized from left to right in order of their speed that they roll. And this goes for both abnormality fights and human fights. However, the way that abnormality fights differ is... Okay, so for example, we can look at this guy. What's he called? Goulet. We can look at Goulet. Right now he's targeting Heathcliff. However, if someone with more speed than him attacks him, we force him to retarget that person and clash with them. So, unlike just picking the skills, you have to actually select the skill and its target. And if you are faster than the enemy, then they target you back. And so you can use this to your advantage. Like, for example, okay, Faust is getting targeted by this guy, but I don't want her to fight this guy. So instead, I'll have Ishmael attack him, and now Faust isn't getting targeted anymore. So that's the only difference between humanoid fights and abnormality fights, is that you have to manually select which target you're attacking. So that pretty much covers everything for combat. Just a couple general tips. I highly recommend leveling the battle pass. Even if you don't pay for the Limbus pass, you can still get some really good ego from it, as well as useful resources. They also recently upgraded Battle Pass missions to give a lot more EXP, so it's much easier to level it up and get some of these really useful rewards. Another thing to keep in mind is that when extracting in the gacha, if you get a character you already have, you get these things called ego shards. And so when you have enough ego shards for a specific character, like I have 150 for Faust, so you can go to the dispensary in the bottom right, and you can exchange these ego shards. It's basically a pity system. You can pick any character you want, as long as the ego shards correspond to the identity or ego that you want. Okay. So additionally, you can exchange these ego shards for thread. So one thing we haven't talked about until now is uptying identities and thread spinning egos. So looking at 7 section 6 Yisong, we can see he's at uptie tier 1. He has skill 1, 3 copies, skill 2, 2 copies, but his third skill is locked. So you actually don't unlock this third skill until you have uptied a character to tier 3. Additionally, his passives, you can see unlocked at tier 2, unlocked at tier 3. So if you were to uptie him, you can see how much thread you need. The ways to get thread are through thread luxcavation and by exchanging ego shards for thread. Those are the 2 ways to get it. You can also get thread boxes from the battle pass. So you can see how his stats change, his speed will increase, his skills will be upgraded, and he'll unlock his first passive if we were to uptie him. And then when we reach uptie tier 3, both skills get another upgrade, plus we get his support passive and his skill 3. Similarly, for Ego have thread spin tiers. So this one is at tier 1. you can see its passive is not yet unlocked. Again, thread spinning, it's a similar process. It costs thread as well. It's just a different name for like limit breaking ego, basically, instead of identities. And you can see it unlocks a passive. And then when you get it to tier 3, here, I can just show you an example. And then if you were to upgrade it to tier 3, it will upgrade the skill itself. So it'll make the numbers a lot better, it'll give them really useful effects, etc. But it is expensive, it costs a lot of thread. So this is something you'll definitely want to do, in addition to leveling up your characters, which you can do by just clicking on them in the center menu. Click on the arrows, and then you can use tickets to level them up. So that's pretty much everything you need to know to succeed in Limbus Company. Thanks so much for watching. If you thought this was a useful tutorial, please leave a like. Comment any questions that you have that weren't answered in the tutorial. Anything you'd want to see in the future. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you guys later. Peace out. Bye-bye.